In the last video, we were able to set up our app to allow the user to create a new account or sign into their account using Google. The fun part starts in this video. We're going to write some cloud functions which will automatically trigger some code to run every time a new user account is created. And the reason we need to do this is because we can't store custom properties such as the emoji status inside of the same data where authentication data lives. So we're going to have a separate collection in Firestore which stores the name of the user along with the emoji status. And that user is going to be created via a cloud function. And so the very first thing I want to do is inside of our Firebase console, we're going to enable Cloud Firestore because we're going to have a cloud function which will write to Cloud Firestore. So we're going to create the database here, start it in test mode, which basically means it's less secure, but we're allowing everyone to read and write from the database as long as they're within a certain time range. So tap on next, and then pick a Firestore location closest to you. I'm in the US, so this is the best one for me. Tap on enable. So now we have our empty Cloud Firestore. And the idea is that we're not going to populate this collection through the client. And instead, Cloud Functions will add users into a user's collection that we're going to have in Cloud Firestore. So the interesting thing about this episode of this series is that we're actually not going to write any Android Kotlin code. All the Cloud Functions are going to be written in JavaScript, and it's going to be a separate directory or project altogether. And so don't worry if you're not experienced with JavaScript. I'm certainly no expert, but I'll explain things as much as I can, and it's actually only a few lines of code, so it shouldn't be that difficult. So open up this link for go to the docs again, and actually we can close out the other tabs because we don't need to look at the authentication stuff again. And what we're going to do is now look at the documentation for Cloud Functions and tap on Get Started. So because we're going to be writing in JavaScript, we're going to have to install some new software in our environment. If you scroll down, we already have a Firebase project. And we're going to now set up Node.js and the Firebase command line tool. So I already have the Firebase tools installed. NPM is a Node package manager. It's a way to, once you have Node, which is a JavaScript environment, then you can add packages onto Node. And so there's a tool called Firebase Tools, which I already installed. If you don't have that, just Google for how to install Node or NPM, and then come back when you're done. Now what you want to do is log into Firebase. And I think I've already done this, but let's check. So tap Firebase login. And okay, so I'm already logged in. This is my email, so that's good. Now what you want to do is you want to create a new directory which is going to hold your Cloud Functions code. So what I did is I went to the same directory where I had created the Android Studio project, and I made a new folder, a new directory in that same parent directory, and I have the same name, but I appended Cloud to it. So this is a brand new directory which has nothing in it. And so what I'm going to do here is run this Firebase init functions call. And what this will do is it will prompt you to set up this Firebase Cloud Functions project. So I'm going to tap an existing project, link it to an existing Firebase project that we have. And ours is EmojiStatus app. And you can use either JavaScript or TypeScript. TypeScript is basically a kind of JavaScript with types, essentially. We're not going to worry about that for now, so just pick JavaScript. Do you want to use ESLint, which is basically a linter to catch probable bugs? And that always seems like a good thing. So tap on yes. And then do you want to install dependencies with npm now? Tap on yes, we do. So this will take a second or two to download all the dependencies. Once that's done, now if you look at all the files in this directory, it created a bunch of things for you. And they're kind of documented over here in the guide. And so what I want to do now is I want to open up this project, this directory in VS Code or your editor of choice. So I have the directory opened up in VS Code right over here. And what we're going to do initially just is uncomment out the starter code. And we'll play around with just this for the first minute, and then we'll do our trigger based on when a new user joins our application. What this is doing though is basically over HTTP, which basically means over the internet, when we receive a request, we want to send back hello from Firebase as the response. One other thing I want to do before we test that out though is if you scroll down, you can import the required modules and initialize an app. And so we're going to copy these bottom lines over here. But if you go back, so we have functions is equal to Firebase functions. We also want the Firebase admin SDK because this is what is going to allow us to create a new user document when we get to that point. So just copy that in and we're going to use that later. So now I want to come back to this. We want to test out this hello world function, which is functions like HTTPS, basically being able to respond with this text whenever someone hits the corresponding URL endpoint. In order to test this out, you can actually use something called the Firebase Cloud Function Emulator. So we're going to skip all this tutorial stuff and just go down here. And here it says emulate execution of your function. So tap on or copy and paste this command, Firebase emulator start, go into your terminal. Cool. So what this is now saying is that all emulators are ready, and you can see the logs from localhost 4000. So I'm going to go to that URL, and here you can see some of the UI associated with the emulator. I'm going to go into the log section because that's the one that we care about. And now I want to actually trigger this function to run. And the way we can do that is if you go back again to the terminal, there should be a URL here. So one thing I forgot doing is just you have to actually save this file, index.js. And then once you do that, then you should see an output when you start the emulator for the URL in order to hit that function, which is the HTTPS function. So I'm going to copy this. And now if we go into the browser and hit that URL, then you can see the text that we wrote, hello from Firebase. And if you look over here, we can see the log output. Going back to VS Code, what we're logging is we're saying hello logs, and that's what you're seeing from the logs right here. And you're also seeing the execution time. When the actual response that we send back is hello from Firebase. And so this is a proof that we are able to talk to a cloud function, at least locally. The next thing I want to do is just show how do you send back an emoji as part of the response as opposed to just plain text. And this took a little bit of Googling, but it's actually not that hard. All you need to do is for sending back an emoji as a response, you can say my favorite emoji is, and then you have this \u, which is an indication that this is a Unicode character, and you put in the code of the Unicode. So in my case, I like pandas a lot, so I'm going to say 1F43C. So now if I go back and hit this URL again, now we can see the panda is updated. So the objective now is we want to have this a cloud function run when a new user is created. And the way we can do that is we can say exports dot, and then you can name this function whatever you want. I'm going to call it add user to Firestore. And here is where we are going to indicate to Cloud Functions that this function should be run automatically every time a new user is created. So we say on create, and this takes in as a parameter the new user, which has just been created. And here is where we define the body of the function. So this code will get run every time the new user has been created. And the job here is simply that we want to add a new document into the users collection of Firestore with the information about this user. And so the way this works is we first get a reference to the user. So we'll say var users ref, we'll say admin.firestore .collection, and we're going to create a new collection if it doesn't exist already called users. Now all we have to do is return the setting of this new information in this users collection. So I'll say users ref dot doc, and the parameter here is we're creating a new document with this particular ID, and the ID will be the UID of the user who just got created, this user here. So I'll say user dot UID, and I want to call the set method. And inside of set, we set the different parameters of this new user document. So the first is going to be display name, which is just the display name of the user, which we are getting from Google. And second is going to be the list of emojis, which is their status. And so here we have the opportunity to set a default emoji status for every new user in our app. And so you can kind of make this whatever you want. What I did is I just picked out 3 emojis that I thought were cute: a panda, which is the same one from before, a herb emoji, and a heart. So basically pandas love eating plants or bamboo or whatever. So we have this default emojis. So now what we can do is deploy this to the cloud to our actual Firebase project, and then try creating an account one more time. So in order to deploy this, what we can do is go back to the documentation, and we're now going to deploy functions to a prod environment. So I'm going to copy this, hit Control-C to exit out of the local emulation, and then we're going to say Firebase deploy -- only functions. And one thing that you'll notice here as an error is that we don't have the proper account set up to be able to deploy Cloud Functions. We need to upgrade our plan to be pay-as-you-go. So what you can do is, this is actually pretty easy to update. You can just hit that link. And then right now, instead of being on the Spark plan, which is free, we're going to modify this to be on the Blaze plan. And don't worry, it's still actually, unless you have a meaningful number of users in your app, this will still be free. So it really shouldn't matter in terms of you having to pay a bunch of money. So I'm just going to go ahead and purchase it. And if you are concerned, you can set a budget alert. So I want to get alerted as soon as I spend $10. So I say set budget alert, and you can close it. Okay, so let's try it one more time. I'm going to rerun the same function, the same command, Firebase deploy functions. And so while that's running, one thing we can do is, if we go back to our console, the true test of what we just did is, if we create a new user account, that should now trigger a Cloud function, and that Cloud function should now show something in Cloud Firestore. So in order to test that path, we need to actually create a new user. So I'm going to delete the user that we already have, and then log into our app again, and then that should trigger this path. So I did that. I deleted the user. Now it's going to Cloud Firestore. And when we go back to our app now, let's see if it finished. Okay, so HTTP error 403. I think this happens sometimes just because we just upgraded our account. Let's try it one more time. So going back to the terminal, looks like we did deploy successfully now. So if we go into our running emulator, let's log out, because this user actually doesn't exist in reality anymore. So now, if we sign into the app, let's see if this works. What that should trigger is a new user being created. Okay, so that seems like it worked because we were able to navigate to the main activity. So if I refresh this page, we should now see that user, which is me, show up. Okay, that's great. Now if we go into Cloud Firestore, and now we do see a new users collection, which is awesome. And here we have this document, which is a display name of the user who just signed in, which is me, along with our default emojis. It's amazing. So this is an indication that we have this kind of end-to-end flow working, which involves authentication, Cloud Functions, and Firestore. In the next video, our job is to update this main activity UI to read from Cloud Firestore, read all this data, and show it in this screen. So if you're enjoying this, hit the like button and subscribe so you get notified when the next part comes out. See you then. Bye.